What's up, everybody? My name is Kason, and today I'm announcing that I am officially joining the BBR. If you guys know what a Pokemon Draft League is, you probably know what the BBR is, as it is one of the most well-known draft competitions on YouTube. Formerly ran by Commissioner Grandmaster D-Ray, it is now run by OG Albina. This league features awesome players and content creators such as Jay Ricky, Q the Costa Rican, King L5, and many more. So it's pretty safe to say when I received my invite to this league, I was ecstatic. But part of me feels like a fraud. I'm going to be competing against top-level competition. There are so many fantastic players in this league who have been doing it far longer than I have. As a reminder, I've only played about 50 Pokemon Draft League games in my entire career. I'm sure there are a number of people out here that are deserving of this spot in this league, and probably quite a few players who think that I don't have what it takes to compete. However, I am going to be using that as fuel and using it as a chip on my shoulder. Even though I think I am a relative unknown in terms of this league, I plan on putting my best foot forward and competing with all of these phenomenal players. Because in the wise words of John Jr., if I don't believe in myself, why should any of you? I don't want to just join this league and put my name out there. I want to join my league and put my stamp on it. I want to be in the finals and I want to win it. So in order to overcome this and to beat all these tremendous players, we're going to have to put a really solid team together. Before going over who's on my roster, I need to tell you what the rules are of this league, as it is slightly different from other leagues that I've done previously. For this league, you have a budget of 110 points to complete your roster. Your roster must consist of 9 to 11 Pokemon, and you can have 2 to 3 Pokemon on your team who are Terra Captains. Certain Pokemon in the format are banned as Terra Captains, but quite a few of them are allowed. When you draft a Pokemon and give it a Terra Captain role, their cost to draft increases. For example, a Pokemon like Iron Boulder, who is just an average Pokemon without Terra, might cost something like 12 or 13 points. But when you give it Terra, this Pokemon is outrageous, and all of a sudden to draft it, it costs 22 points. With only 110 points to cover for 9 to 11 Pokemon, you have to be smart with your picks. In most drafts that I've had in the past, I end up being right around the middle of the draft. However, I got very fortunate this time. I ended up with the number 1 overall pick. In most draft leagues, I think there are a few Pokemon to consider for number 1 overall. A lot of times, Dragapult is the number 1 Pokemon to consider, especially if you're not going with the Terra Captain. However, in this format, Dragapult is banned. So to me, there were 2 options. Number 1, I could grab a very strong Terra Captain right out of the gate. Number 2, I could grab what was, in my opinion, the strongest overall Pokemon in the format that cannot Terra. With 16 different teams in the league and having the first overall pick in a snake draft format, I was going to have to wait 32 picks before selecting again, which means I had to make this first pick count. In my opinion, Terra is an absolutely broken mechanic. However, Terra can be a broken mechanic on a number of strong Pokemon. So ultimately, I decided I did not want to grab my Terra Captain round 1 and would grab the strongest Pokemon in the format. A Pokemon that I also have been wanting to try for quite a while. And that is none other than Iron Valiant, who will be named Homelander for this season. Shout out to The Boys, which is an absolutely awesome show. Iron Valiant is a staple in the draft league scene, as when you look at its stats on paper, it doesn't seem like anything too crazy. Its attack and special attack are high, and speed is decent at a 116 base. However, when you really dive into the move pool and the typing, that is when this thing gets crazy. It is a fairy fighting typing, which is almost unguardable in terms of its dual stabs, with the poison type really being the only solid answer to both of those types at the same time. Besides the fact that it gets almost every single type in the game for its attacking moves, it also gets things like Encore and Destiny Bond to boot, and it gets an absolutely insane move pool. It can set up with Swords Dance or Calm Mind. It has priority with Stab Vacuum Wave. This thing is a home run hit with the first overall pick. And also, I think this is just easily one of the coolest looking Pokemon in the format, so to grab it first overall, I was very excited. Going into the second pick, I thought originally I was going to pick something that matched very well typing wise to help out my Iron Valiant. However, I saw a Pokemon sitting there at the end of round 2, which again is pick number 32 in the draft, that is way too strong to still be there in my opinion. It is a Pokemon that I've drafted before, and a Pokemon I'm incredibly excited to use again. and that is Butcher the Iron Hands. However, this is not just a normal Iron Hands, as even though I didn't know it at the time of drafting, I ended up deciding this would be my main Terra Captain for the season. Now, Iron Hands is not crazy fast. 50 base speed is quite slow, but its bulk is insane. It hits like an absolute truck. And I have shown before that in battles, if this thing can get the sword stance up, it potentially can just clean teams right there. The fact that I'm able to use it as a Terra Captain can allow me to set things up very easily with either sword stance or belly drum. It can also be used as an incredibly good defensive option because of those crazy base stats. If I need it to be a certain typing to check something defensively, it can do that very well. And ultimately, I'm just so excited to use this mon. I think this is legitimately like a top 15 mon in the format. So for it to be there at the 32nd overall pick, I didn't care that I was grabbing dual fighting to start the draft. Regardless of the typing, in my opinion, early in the draft, I think you just draft the best mons available. And for me, this felt like a no-brainer. With my 3rd overall pick, though, I did want to grab something that can resist Fairy, as my first 2 picks are both weak to Fairy if I don't Terra out of it. So I saw a really fun mon that, again, I have used in previous seasons. I used this in my very first Draft League season, and it is A-Train the Iron Crown. This Pokemon at 12 points feels like highway robbery. Steel Psychic typing, which is really nice defensively for the 2 Pokemon that I've already chosen. It also gets Volt Switch for momentum and can easily set up with Calm Mind, with Agility, or things like that. A lot of times I do want my Steel type to have Stealth Rock, but this thing not having it I don't think is the end of the world. And it also gives me a cool option here with my first 3 Pokemon all being future Paradox Pokemon. All 3 of these Pokemon get the move Electric Terrain, and normally that is not a move you want to click, but when you have 3 different future Paradox Pokemon on the team, it actually becomes a move that can be worth clicking. If I set up Electric Terrain, all 3 of these Pokemon will get a boost to their highest stat when it is on the field. So very similarly to how I've used Weather teams in the past, which I think is one of my strongest forms of when I've played, I can actually use Terrain to make these 3 Pokemon go crazy. With a nice 98 base speed stat, it feels a pretty good gap of where I have my first 2 mons to start. Well, looking at these 3 mons, I knew for certain that I needed a ground immunity. So I grabbed Rotom Heat for only 8 points. Now, this feels like a pretty early round to grab Rotom Heat, but I believe Rotom Wash was already gone. And I wanted to get a Rotom because, one, I've never actually used a Rotom before in Draft League, but 8 points seemed pretty cheap for this thing. The fire typing does give me another fairy resist, which is nice. Another ground immunity is fantastic. And honestly, just having Volt Switch for momentum, Will-O-Wisp, and Thunder Wave is great utility. It gives me a screen setter. It gets Pain Split, Nasty Plot. Rotom is one of those Pokemon that just feels like a glue piece where if I don't necessarily know what to bring, I can just slap a Rotom in there and it's probably going to get some work done. It's probably going to status something, it's probably going to chunk something, and it can actually take hits fairly well. And at this point of the draft, I did realize that all 4 of my Pokemon to start this draft can all use the move Electric Terrain, which again is pretty fun. The next pick I ended up choosing, I ended up dropping in Grace Period before week 1. So the Pokemon that you're going to see on screen is not actually what I drafted. I originally drafted Vaporeon because I wanted a Water Absorb user and a slow momentum mon. However, I ended up changing that pick. I ended up dropping it for the Deep, aka Gastrodon. Gastrodon unfortunately does not get Flip Turn like Vaporeon does, so there's no slow momentum here. However, at the end of my draft, you will see I had a couple of weaknesses that I wanted to patch up well. I wanted an extra hazard setter, and I also wanted a ground type, which gives me an electric immunity. Having your water type immune to electric damage is always really useful, as there is only one weakness for this Pokemon, and it is the grass type. And as you can see, we already have a couple of nice grass resistances to boot. So having a Pokemon that can set up hazards, can absorb any sort of water attack, which we did not have a resistance for yet, I think can actually put in some work on the roster that we have. The next Pokemon that I'm going to show you, I grabbed for one reason and one reason only. It's because it's stupidly good and should not be available in round 6. Whether or not it actually fit the team, I don't know, and I don't care, because we grabbed Dragonite for only 14 points in round 6. Now, Dragonite gives us so much good offensive potential here. Having the multi-scale ability means that it can be either a really strong offensive lead, or it can be great with the heavy-duty boots option late in the game. With one single Dragon Dance, Dragonite can often clean up teams in the endgame, so if Valiant doesn't look like a good endgame option, Dragonite can certainly take that role. And if Valiant does look like a good endgame option, I can use Dragonite offensively early in the game to break holes through teams. Not only does it get the Dragon Dance move, which is almost always a guarantee to go off because of its multi-skill ability, making sure that we take only half damage from any hit when it's at full health, but it also gets extreme speed, which is a really, really good move that gives awesome priority. Up to this point in the draft, the only priority we had was Vacuum Wave, essentially, on Iron Valiant, as I don't really count Fake Out, so extreme speed gives us another really nice priority move. With these 6 Pokemon in the builder, I actually felt really good with my team. Having 32 points overall, I didn't feel like there was a ton of stuff I needed. I knew at some point that I would want to get some sort of hazard removal, but the really good hazard removal options got taken very early in the draft. So in my opinion, I felt like if I'm not going to get one of the best ones, I will just wait till near the end to actually pick that up. One thing that I did really want though was a nice grass type, as it gives me another ground resistance, another water resistance, and also this Pokemon happens to get a move that I think is broken. Starlight the Shaman here gets Healing Wish, and at only 8 points and 600 base stats, I think this thing is a steal. It doesn't get incredible coverage. Most of the time, you're going to just hit with a grass type attack. However, it does get Air Slash and Earth Power. Pairing that with the fact that you can Healing Wish a Pokemon, which I have a Terra Iron Hands, which wants to take tons of hits. I can potentially have Iron Hands take 2, 3, 4 hits or something like that during the battle, take out a Pokemon, it gets really chunked. I can switch into Shaman and Healing Wish it back up, and now all of a sudden you have to beat that Terra Iron Hands twice. The other nice thing about this is sometimes you're going to run into people who want to status your team. They want to throw out a Will-O-Wisp or a Thunder Wave to try and burn one of my physical threats or slow down one of my fast threats like my Iron Valiant. And in that case, the Natural Cure ability that Shaman gets allows me to switch in Shaman, get statused by whatever move that is, and when I swap Shaman out, it gets cured of its status, which means if I'm really concerned by one of those moves, I can safely put Shaman in, and once it swaps out and comes back in, it's no longer there and it can keep on trucking. At this point, I like my roster quite a bit. However, I am seeing a couple of things that I don't love. One is I don't have a ton of fast momentum. 2, I don't have a ton of knockoff users, and 3, I don't have just a ton of fast mons in general. Paired with the fact that I don't have any sort of ghost type or normal type for some of those immunities, I saw a Pokemon that I've used before that I've been dying to play again, and that is Black Noir, the Hisuian Zoroark. 10 points for this bad boy. I have used this guy before. I used him in the IBL, and I absolutely loved using him. I brought him to almost every single match. I think this Pokemon is slept on. For only 10 points, I think it offers quite a bit. It offers a lot of offensive pressure. It has Will-O-Wisp to try and burn things. It has Fast Taunt. It can even go for Memento, which means I can drop stats of a certain Pokemon and maybe, just maybe, let one of my Pokemon like Iron Valiant set up. Iron Valiant a lot of times isn't going to live 1 or 2 hits from the opposing Pokemon, but if I can go for something like that and give it a chance to, Valiant can potentially clean up. Paired with the fact that I can disguise this thing as a lot of other Pokemon, it creates a lot of mind games for the opponent. It makes them second guess themselves and what play they are going to make, and ultimately one bad turn for the opponent against a team like mine with things like Terra, Iron Hands, Dragonite, and Valiant, I think can be the end of the game in certain situations. With 14 points remaining and 8 mons drafted, I can use these 14 points however I want amongst 1 to 3 Pokemon, and ultimately at the end of the day, the next Pokemon I decided to go with was Colossal. And now this is a Pokemon that I have slept on for a long time. I don't think I ever really respected this Pokemon or even considered drafting it until I faced Bruno in the playoffs of the SPDA. And I remember looking at a Terra Ghost Colossal and thinking, this is a nightmare for me in prep. This thing gets 3 awesome abilities with Flame Body, Flash Fire, and Steam Engine. Its typing sucks, I'll be honest. Rock Fire is not great. However, with the ability to Terra, this thing is actually insanely bulky. It's legitimately Iron Hands levels of bulk, and probably even better on the special side. Not only that, but it gives me another hazard setter with Stealth Rocks and Spikes, and it also gives me hazard removal with Rapid Spin. Being able to spread burns everywhere, or at least make Pokemon on the other team think about whether or not they just want to spam the move U-turn and not catch a burn, is really, really nice. And ultimately, for only 5 points, free Terra Colossal seems like a steal to me. I knew with only 9 points remaining, there were a couple of things I wanted. Number 1 was a grounded poison. The only hazard removal I have right now is Colossal, and I don't want to just lose to T-Spikes each week, which brings in Ashley the Muck, the Gen 1 poison type. I've never gotten to use Muck before, and I'm pretty excited about it. This thing actually has pretty underrated bulk with over 100 base in HP and special defense, and a decent defense and physical attack stat to boot. It gets Toxic Spikes, it gets set up with Curse, and it even gets things like Drain Punch and Knock Off. I think this thing fills a pretty decent hole in my team, so with 5 points, I'm actually really excited about the value that this Ashley brings. And now with only 4 points remaining and 1 choice remaining, I looked at those first 3 Pokemon on my team, and I said, I have an Iron Valiant, I have an Iron Hands, and I have an Iron Crown. You know what would be great here? An electric terrain setter. So I went and grabbed Indeedee. Wait, Indeedee, what? That's not an electric terrain setter. That's a psychic terrain setter. So for 4 points, we got a psychic terrain setter, both the male and female Indeedee version. And now you might be asking, why the hell didn't I grab Pincurchin, the electric terrain setter? And there are 2 reasons for this. Number 1, I think Pincurchin is a bit of a fraud of a Pokemon. I am welcome to be wrong about that, and maybe down the line, if Indeedee's not working for me, I might just pick up Pincurchin to make some of these booster mons go crazy. However, I grabbed Indeedee for a couple of reasons. Number 1, I get both forms for only 4 points. If you were around for my first PUDL run, you saw that I used female Indeedee, which cost me like 8 points that season, actually quite a bit. I love its support options with Screens and Trick Room and Healing Wish. And again, if you heard me what I said about Healing Wish with Shaman, I think this move is broken. Paired with the fact that Indeedee female can be pretty bulky, this can give me a Trick Room plus Healing Wish option for my Terra Iron Hands. And Terra Iron Hands and Trick Room, guys, is very, very threatening. Felt like overall, these 2 Pokemon give me more to my team than the Pincurchin does, because the other thing of this is having the male Indeedee form. If there's no dark type on the opposing Pokemon, I can just bring Indeedee with a Specs or a Scarf and just spam Expanding Force into the team, which can deal an absolute ton of damage. Again, if I don't like this Pokemon, I may switch it out for Pincurchin later, but ultimately, I'm pretty excited about this roster. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Let me know what you think down below in the comments of this new roster, and let me know if you are excited for it. I am incredibly pumped to be playing in the BBR. There are so many good coaches and so many good content creators. Honestly, there's probably a lot of people who are deserving to be in my spot as well. But what I'm going to do is try my absolute hardest. I've got a chip on my shoulder here to prove that it was not a mistake to invite me to this league. I'm going to put my best foot forward, and I think we're going to have some good results. So thank you guys so much for watching. 1 week from now will be my week 1 battle against Gentleman Thomas, which I'm incredibly excited for. Also another fantastic content creator, and it should be a good time. But until next time, guys, have a wonderful day.